not going to take up any more time. To date, we have 2 students speaking in chapel, one in this chapel and a different student in second chapel. If you want to double dip, Emily Heisel will be with us in the second chapel. Feel free to double dip. Even though it doesn't get you double credit, you can still just come. Just not going to mislead you now. But today we have one of my favorite people, actually, Austin Rojan. He is part of the College of Ministry. He's a grad student. He's one of my dear and close friends, and we're really excited for him to talk more on the Sermon on the Mount. So would you please help me welcome our friend, Austin Rojan.
All right, then. How's everyone doing? Good? Yeah? I know many of you who just whooped are actually dying on the inside because it's that time of the semester, and we're all just trying to live another day, and that's totally okay. I'm in that exact same place. I'm finishing up my master's here, and man, it is awful some days, let's be honest. It's hard. It's really hard doing school. So would you mind taking a moment with me to simply pray and encounter our God today? Well, good morning, Father. It's just good to be with you today. God, I have so much to be thankful for in this season, but I also just have so much that's heavy on my heart. And knowing so many people in this room, I just know what's going on in their lives, and I just know there's a lot of us here who are heavy today. Because of circumstances in our own lives, or because of the circumstances of those that we love, who are hurting and broken and lost. God, I don't know what to do with that most days. But God, I just sense your presence and your spirit telling me to keep moving forward. That you're going to bring redemption, you're going to bring healing. And God, I want to be a part of that. I don't want to miss out on that. So, Father, would you send your Spirit to us today to be manifest amongst us? That we would hear your word, hear what it is that Jesus wants to speak to us today. And God, may we be transformed by it. May we have ears to hear and eyes to see what it is you're doing in our lives and the lives of people around us. God, would you shape us more into the instruments of mercy that you've created to bring wholeness and functionality into this world? Spirit, would you speak to us today? God, I just want to say I love you and say that it's good to be loved by you. And so I pray all this in the name of your son, Jesus, because it's the only name I could ever pray in. Amen. All right, then. Well, before I begin, I have to know how good of company I'm in. How many people here love the movie The Princess Bride? Oh, family. I'm so glad. If you could, would you please shout out the name of your favorite character in The Princess Bride? 1, 2, 3. I'm so glad I heard so many Inigo Montoyas. Oh, goodness. It speaks to my heart. Love Inigo Montoya. He's played by one of my favorite actors, a guy named Mandy Patinkin. Anybody know any of Mandy's other works? Homeland, yes, very famous for Homeland. Most people don't know that he was also Jason Gideon on the show Criminal Minds in the first few seasons. I didn't put that together for a really long time, and my mind blew when I figured it out. And I was listening to an interview with Mandy where he was reflecting on the process of him getting the part of Inigo Montoya. Basically, they gave him the script and then said, "What character do you want?" And he just got to pick whatever he wanted, which is insane. Especially as a 30-year-old. And he chose Inigo because 10 years prior to him making the movie, his father had died of cancer. And so when he read Inigo's story, he told himself, if you get this part, if you become Inigo, and you get that six-fingered man, who, if you don't know the story, is the man who kills his father in the movie, if you get him, that man is cancer, and if you kill him, your father will come back. And that's the mentality that he brought into that part. And he shot that movie in his 30s. He's in his 60s now, and he's still doing concerts and killing it. But he did an interview just a few years ago where he was telling the story of watching the movie again with his wife. They were in their hotel room eating dinner together, and he was watching the movie because he was getting parts ready for a concert that he was doing, and so he was freshening up on lines and that kind of a thing. And he tells the interviewer that at the very end of the movie, a line stuck out to him in a way that it had never stuck out before. It was like it was someone else speaking. He even referred to it. He was like, I heard the guy, and he was like, who's played by me, like almost shocked by it, say this line. And that kid who said it had no idea what he was saying at the time. But now for me, it's become, and this is Mandy speaking, it's become the line of the movie. It's become the line of my life. At the very end of the movie, Inigo, after killing the six-fingered man, is speaking to his friend and says, I have been in the revenge business for so long. Now that it's over, I do not know what to do with the rest of my life. And I've been in this season recently where I kind of hit a wall. For those of you who are close to me, Christian, you may know that I have a tendency to work too much. And sometimes I hear people talk about working too much, and they do it kind of like in a humble brag kind of way, like, oh, I work too much, but really they're like trying to get you to compliment on it. No, this is not like that. This was like I was neglecting my wife, destroying like my relationships with family, destroying my body. Like it was evil in its essence. This is nothing that I'm bragging about. Actually, I have a lot more guilt about it than I do pride at this point. But I hit a point where I just realized I couldn't keep the pace that I was moving anymore. I was getting to the office at 9 a.m. and getting back home at like 3 or 4 a.m. every day, 7 days a week, and I wouldn't see my wife in the morning, and then I'd come back home, and she would already be asleep because she had work in the morning. And man, one morning I just went into my executive pastor's office, and I closed the door, and I just like broke down in front of him. And he was like, okay, I was doing something, but we can do this too. This is okay. And so I laid it out for him. Like, and my workaholism has nothing to do with my pastors and my bosses. They've let me free. They're like, yeah, you're good at youth ministry. Like, do your thing. And they just want updates every so often on the cool things that are happening. It's all me. It's all internal, my own drive, my own addiction. And so we began the process of figuring out what life would look like with a different set of habits that would be more sustainable for me. And so that next week, the first thing that we did is I took some emergency time off to kind of rest and reset. And I thought going into that week, I would feel better at the end of it. I'd have some rest, I'd have some time to reflect, blah, blah, blah. The exact opposite happened. My mental health got way worse. I had a panic attack every night before I went to sleep that week because I had my identity so tied up and how much I could produce. And when it was taken away from me, I lost it. I didn't know what to do with myself anymore. And I was reflecting on this, trying to get at the root of, okay, God, this goes far beyond like I'm bored and I want something to do. Like this is a pretty deep-seated issue. So what is it that you're trying to speak to me? And he brought to mind two memories. The first was a memory of me sitting in the car with my dad as a kid before a drum lesson. And at some point while I'm warming up, getting ready, my dad just turns over to me, and all he says is, and I'm in the 8th or 7th grade at this point, all he says is, you better be the best drummer when you get to high school, because I'm not paying for all these lessons for you to not be the best. And at the moment, I was like, okay, whatever, I'll try. But that moment imprinted on me so deeply. And then God brought to mind another memory that's a little bit more recent, where me and my dad were talking, and my dad was complaining about how much work that he was doing and how tired he was. And I got so volatilely angry internally. I didn't say anything. I was just like, that sounds really hard, Dad. But on the inside, I was like fuming for no good reason. And I was like, how much are you working right now? And he was like, 60, 70 hours a week. I'm maxing out my overtime. And I think that was a week where I had done like 120 hours or something crazy like that. And in my head, all I wanted to say was like, you don't know anything about work. Like, shut up, Dad. It's so irrational. I look back on it, I'm like, you're such an angsty teenager. Like, I'm never going to grow out of emo Austin. It's just never going to happen. It's just always going to be inside of me. And God, he pointed out to me that I had allowed the bitterness towards my parents for the pain that they had caused me to develop into a behavior of self-preservation, where every time someone in my life important to me withheld their affection or love of me because I simply didn't meet the expectations that they had for me, it hurt. And I made a vow day after day throughout most of my life that I was never going to allow anyone else to hurt me like that again. So what did I do? I learned to work harder than everyone else around me. I had to make sure that no one could say they were outworking me. In college, it got so bad. Oh my gosh, I look on this time of my life. Sophomore year, it got so bad that I was taking 18 credits, working a part-time job, and turning 30 to 40 hours a week. And I slept 3 to 4 hours a night with like a couple all-nighters, at least 2 times a week, for several months of my sophomore year, until it literally put me in a hospital. And you think I would kind of like deal with it and get to the root of it then, but I'm really stubborn and hard-headed, so it took me a few more years to kind of get at the root of this. But I give you my story, but I see the same thing happening in so many people around me. Man, I see so many people who have been wounded in their life and made a vow, I'm never going to be hurt like that again. And so they learn behaviors to protect themselves. And we justify those behaviors. We make it a mission. We throw some spiritualized self-help mumbo-jumbo around it to make it sound good to everyone else and ourselves. In reality, most often the places that we have the most motivation and the most drive are the places that are being fueled by past wounds. And what I found is that, man, it'll drive you for a long time, and it'll keep you going, and you'll be passionate, and everyone will compliment you on your hard work ethic and all the good things that you're doing. But eventually, that motivation will kill everything good in your life. And maybe you're here today, and you found the thing that you were looking for, and you found it lacking. And you're saying the same words as Inigo. I've been in the revenge business for so long, I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. Or maybe you're here today and you're still in the pursuit of something. You're still chasing something with the thought that once I get or achieve that thing, then I'll be satisfied. And really, when I say that, what we really mean is, then we'll be even. Then they'll see. And no one's ever going to be able to hurt me again because I made it. It's this lie of self-preservation and self-sufficiency. And so the text that I want to look at today, this teaching of Jesus, I really believe gets right at the heart of this very issue of our motivations and our desire to get even with those who have hurt us. So at this point, I have so much in my head that I'm not sure quite where the Spirit's going to lead me. Obviously, I have my notes. I have a full manuscript that I could read off of, but I don't want to do that today. That would just feel disingenuous. So if we could just throw up Matthew 5:38-42 on the screen. Can we, I love doing this. Can we all stand together and read it out loud? I love this. I don't know. I'm old-fashioned. Let's read the word of the Lord. It says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you." And this is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. So I would love to take like an entire New Testament semester to go over the full context of everything that Jesus just said, because it's so dense. It's so stupidly dense. I don't understand how Jesus teaches like this. I mean, he ties together almost the entire Old Testament story into every little lesson and sentence that he gives off. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to do that today, and I don't think most of you would be very interested, since most of you are already taking New Testament with Dr. Charette or someone else like that. So I'm sure you don't need me to review that material with you. Instead, I'm just going to move into the passage and begin gaining some clarity about it, because this is kind of weird. Jesus gives 4 examples of what he means, which is great. It helps us understand. The unfortunate part is that these examples are 2,000 years old, and they don't really make much sense if you're not a first century Jew. And so they're a little confusing to us today. So we're just going to go through and gain some clarity. So Jesus starts off by quoting Exodus 21, which is the statement of, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. In Old Testament theology, this kind of a law is a part of a set of laws called lex talionis, which means 1 for 1. And it was a way for Israel to become a society in which the punishment for a crime can never be greater than the crime committed. See, in cultures around Israel in the ancient Near East, oftentimes the punishment for a crime depended on the difference in social class between the two people involved. So if a person of a lower class hurt or offended somebody of a higher class, it wouldn't simply be a slap for a slap, a foot for a foot. It would be like, oh, you stole bread from me? Well, I'm rich and you're poor, so I'm going to kill you and then take your family as slaves. Like, that was the law of many ancient Near Eastern societies. And so this law that almost seems barbaric to us modern people is actually one of the most revolutionary thoughts in all of human development, that there is no difference in social class and that every human life is equally valuable no matter what class you live into. And I could go preaching on that, but I'm going to have to continue moving on. So off that soapbox. And then he says, "But I say to you, do not resist an evil person." Now, 2 things that Jesus is not doing here. 1, Jesus is not getting rid of the law, not even Exodus 21. He has already stated he's not going to dismiss any part of the law. 2nd, Jesus is not raising the bar of the law. And I hear this taught all of the time. People teach through the Sermon on the Mount as if Jesus is basically saying, oh, you thought it was hard being a good person before? Well, I'm going to raise the ante to like infinity, and that way you're going to feel guilty and shameful for the rest of your life because you're never going to be able to hit it. Ha! And I just don't see Jesus in that kind of a way. I really believe that Jesus wants us to live into the instruction that he's given us. He's actually empowered us and enabled us to be able to live into the ways that he taught his disciples, which is us here today. So what does Jesus mean then? Well, he gives us 4 examples, as I said. So let's go through those one by one and gain some clarity. First, he says, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. And this, I'm going to spend most of my time here because this really gets at the heart of things. If a person is being slapped on the right cheek, and Jesus is taking the time to define that, and they're living in a predominantly right-handed culture, Jesus is referring to a backhanded slap, which is not simply an assault on somebody. This is like a direct attack on their honor. This is like the equivalent of spitting on someone's face. It's an intense move to make on somebody. And Jesus says, okay, when somebody dishonors you in this way, when someone spits on your face, the correct response is to give them your other cheek also, which is ludicrous. Who would ever respond in such a way? Who wouldn't defend themselves? But Jesus uses this kind of almost hyperbolic language at times to get people to really wrestle with what is the truth behind what he is saying. I believe that what Jesus is trying to get at here is the very heart of everything that I've been talking about this morning. He's saying that when someone hurts you, when someone offends you, when someone wounds you, when someone attacks you, the correct response is not getting even. In any way, the correct response is a giving over of oneself to that person. I'll be honest with you, I still don't fully understand this. It's so far beyond my paradigm of what I understand to be reality that I'm constantly wrestling with what Jesus is saying here. What do you mean I give myself over, I give my other cheek to those who would dishonor and attack me? What about those who dishonor and attack the ones that I love? Do I get to defend them? In which cases do I get to defend them? Jesus doesn't specify here. And I wish we could go through the rest of the book of Matthew because Jesus lives out his very teaching. I mean, you look at his crucifixion, and Matthew is so blatant about this backhanded slap that he receives from the Roman guards. And his response is fascinating. It is not simply a passive acceptance of the offense. He actually responds, but his response is not a defense of his honor. It's a defense of justice. He says, what have I done wrong to deserve this? If I have done wrong, then may you continue, but first prove my offense. This is a complex idea, and I don't have the time to get into all of the nitty-gritty of it and how it applies to all of our different lives and all of the different situations that we find ourselves in. That's why we have to go back to these words and reflect on them and pray in the Spirit. Would you give us wisdom and understanding how it is we apply Jesus' horribly challenging teaching to this time here and now? I don't fully understand it, but I pray that the Spirit would speak to you today and find the places in which you have been trying to get even. Whether that's in a relationship that you simply can't reconcile, or in a habit of self-preservation that has given you an identity and a motivation to live life the way that you have been. Jesus is saying, my people live differently. Their response to evil is not evil. It is not getting even. It is mercy. It is grace. It is reconciliation. And so Jesus gives his second example. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. For the longest time when I read this, I always assumed that the one doing the suing was doing it out of a kind of evil heart, like they were wrongfully suing this person because of the context of the teaching. Do not resist an evil person, so when someone sues you, don't withhold from them, even if it's done in evil intent. But a commentator actually pointed out to me that frivolous lawsuits probably didn't occur in the first century Jewish communities like it does today. Their system didn't really allow for that kind of stuff. It could actually bite you in the butt pretty hard. And if you sue someone and it's found wrong, and they're not found guilty, you could actually receive the same punishment that they would have had if they were found guilty, simply for suing them for that thing. So people didn't just do this randomly. People didn't spill McDonald's coffee on themselves and then make millions off of it. That's not how things worked back then. So why is Jesus suddenly flipping the script on this situation? Why is he going from, okay, when someone does evil to you, don't respond in getting even, and then suddenly I'm the evil person in this example? Jesus, what are you doing? It's brilliant. Jesus just knows the human heart so well. He's preemptively responding and qualifying his first example by saying, okay, yes, do not attempt to get even with those who do evil to you. But when someone tries to get even with you when you've done something wrong and they try to do something like sue you, the correct response is not, Jesus said turn the other cheek, and you're just not demonstrating the kingdom ethic that our Messiah taught. You don't get to say that. Jesus says when someone gets even with you, go over and above what they ask. Again, give yourself to them. Now, notice the premise of this is you actually did something wrong. I'm not encouraging you to apologize and repent of things that you should not be apologizing for. That's not the way that Jesus teaches how to have conflict, and it's not what's going to bring true restoration in relationship in our world. It's just going to build these facades of fake relationships where there's no actual substance underneath it. And so Jesus finally wraps up with two final examples that kind of expand it out to everyone. He says, if somebody makes you carry, how does this translation put it? Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too. For those of you who don't know, this is a reference to a practice that Roman soldiers had in the first century. They were able to make any occupied citizen carry their equipment for 1 mile to help the military on long journeys. And they abused this all the time. They would make Jewish people carry their equipment on the Sabbath day, which is a horrible offense to the Jewish community. And Jesus says, even your enemies must you show this extravagant, reckless love toward. Even when someone attacks you in the most public and degrading way, respond with even more. Show them the grace that you have received and do it joyfully. And then finally, give to him who asks of you and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow. Jesus he's just getting at the heart of it and saying, listen, this paradigm of grace and mercy and giving of oneself, having a disregard for my own honor, my own material possessions, in order that I would prioritize the relationships in this world above everything else. Because nothing matters as long as I'm living in dysfunctionality with other humans. It's not how God created us to be. It's not shalom. It's not peace. It's not functionality. It's destruction and disorder. And it's not what Jesus wants for his people. He's saying, this has to become so all-encompassing. This has to become so central to who you are that you're just looking for ways to go out and show grace and mercy to others. You're just excited for the ability to even bless another human being. Give to anyone who asks of you, and don't refuse anyone that would ever ask to borrow. Have such a deep love for humans that everything else, all of your possessions, even your own honor, just becomes irrelevant. Jesus He wants his people to live in shalom. And shalom is not simply the lack of arguing. It's not simply the lack of conflict. It is things working as they're meant to work. Listen, if every time you go to see your family, and I'm preaching to me right now, if every time you go to see them, there's just this hard tension around the things that no one's talking about or the wounds that have been inflicted across one another, but no one's fighting, that's not shalom. Simply having a quiet house, a quiet dorm room, just because everything seems okay doesn't mean that it is. God desires us that we would be like Adam and Eve, marked in our relationships primarily by trust and vulnerability, where we give our hearts to others in wholeness for the rest of eternity. Looking forward to the day that Jesus returns, reunites everything back together, and conflict is over. Shalom is forever. We no longer have to protect ourselves, and self-preservation disappears. Because my relationship to every other human is simply open and vulnerable, and I trust them with my life. Our time is up today, so if you would just please stand in this moment. I just want to pray a prayer of blessing over you today. So if you would take a posture of receptivity by putting out your hands, you're welcome to do that. Father, I bless these students today in the name of your Son, Jesus. May your Spirit transform their hearts into people who desire peace, wholeness in their relationships with others. Would you point out the places in their lives where they have refused reconciliation and have gone out pursuing getting even in all the subtle ways that we as humans do? Would you bring grace and love to our hard hearts and make them soft in order that we would be transformed by your Spirit into a new community marked by love, trust, and vulnerability. Amen. I pray that you come to experience the love of God for yourself, although you'll never understand it. Amen. Go have a blessed day. Discuss what you've heard today with others.